Introduction. The main problem, the debt crisis no one talks about. The world is drowning in debt. Global debt reached a staggering $313 trillion in 2024, with household debt accounting for over $55 trillion of that figure. In the United States alone, consumer debt has surpassed $17 trillion, with the average American carrying approximately $104,000 in total debt across mortgages, student loans, auto loans, and credit cards. But these numbers, as alarming as they are, tell only a fraction of the story. Consider Sarah, a 34-year-old marketing professional living in Chicago. She earns $75,000 annually, a respectable income that should provide a comfortable middle-class existence. Yet Sarah finds herself trapped in what financial experts call the debt treadmill. She has $45,000 in student loans, $12,000 in credit card debt accumulated during a period of unemployment, and a $28,000 auto loan on a car she bought when her old vehicle finally gave out. Her monthly debt payments consume 47% of her take-home pay, leaving her with just $2,100 monthly for rent, utilities, groceries, and all other living expenses. Sarah represents millions of people who did everything right. She earned a degree, secured stable employment, and made responsible choices. Yet she feels like she's drowning. Her anxiety manifests physically. She experiences insomnia, tension headaches, and a constant knot of worry in her stomach. She avoids opening her mail, screens calls from unknown numbers, and has developed what psychologists call financial avoidance behavior, a coping mechanism where people simply stop engaging with their financial reality because it feels too painful. The cultural conditioning problem. Sarah's story is not unique. It's the result of decades of cultural conditioning that has taught us three dangerous lies about debt. Lie number 1, debt is normal and unavoidable. We've been conditioned to accept debt as an inevitable part of adult life. Student loans are good debt. A mortgage is necessary. Car payments are just part of having a reliable vehicle. This normalization has made us numb to the true cost of borrowing. James, a 28-year-old software developer, recently bought a new Tesla Model 3. The monthly payment is $725 over 72 months, with a 6.5% interest rate. When his friends questioned the expense, he responded that everyone has car payments, it's just part of life. What James didn't calculate was that over the life of the loan, he'll pay $52,200 for a car that will be worth approximately $25,000 after 3 years. The opportunity cost is even more staggering. If James had invested that $725 monthly in a diversified portfolio earning 8% annual returns, he would have accumulated $66,000 after 5 years. The normalization of debt has made us blind to its true cost. We've stopped asking fundamental questions like, can I truly afford this, and replaced them with, can I make the monthly payment? Lie number 2, debt is a sign of success. We've been conditioned to view debt-financed consumption as evidence of achievement. The house, the car, the vacations, they all signal I've made it. But these signals are hollow when they come with strings attached. Maria, a 42-year-old dentist, earns $180,000 annually. On paper, she's extraordinarily successful. Yet Maria carries $360,000 in combined debt, a $300,000 mortgage on a house she bought at the market peak, a $40,000 practice loan, and $20,000 in credit card debt for maintaining the lifestyle she felt was expected of her profession. Her husband was laid off 2 years ago and hasn't found comparable employment. Their household income has dropped by 60%, but their debt obligations remain unchanged. Maria's experience illustrates what psychologists call the hedonic treadmill, the tendency to adapt to improved circumstances and immediately seek the next level of consumption. Each promotion brought a bigger house, a nicer car, more expensive vacations. But instead of increasing satisfaction, these purchases created increasing financial obligations. Maria is now trapped in a cycle where her income is substantial but her obligations prevent any real financial progress. Lie number 3, debt is just a financial problem. This is perhaps the most damaging lie of all. Debt is never just about money. It's about psychological stress, relationship strain, health deterioration, and the slow erosion of hope. A 2023 study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that individuals with high debt-to-income ratios are 2.5 times more likely to report depression and anxiety symptoms. The same study found that debt stress is associated with a 31% increase in heart disease risk and a 28% increase in ulcer risk. The physiological cost of financial worry is real and measurable. Robert, a 52-year-old factory supervisor, has been carrying $30,000 in credit card debt for nearly 8 years. The debt originated when he took out cash advances to cover medical expenses after his wife was diagnosed with cancer. They couldn't afford the deductibles and out-of-pocket maximums. The debt has grown through interest charges and late fees. Robert works 60-hour weeks, takes overtime whenever it's available, and has developed hypertension and chronic back pain. His marriage is strained, his relationship with his adult children is distant, and he's resigned himself to the belief that he'll work until he dies. The core reframe, debt as a neutral tool. Here's the uncomfortable truth: debt itself is neither good nor bad. It's a tool. Like a hammer, it can build a house or break a window, the outcome depends entirely on how it's used. A scalpel can save a life or take one. Fire can heat a home or burn it down. The neutrality of the tool does not diminish its power, it simply means that power is channeled by the user's intention and skill. The central premise: the same tool that traps one person can accelerate another into freedom. The difference between burden and leverage isn't the debt itself, it's the strategy, psychology, discipline, and structure applied to it. Let's compare two people with identical financial profiles. Michael, 30 years old, $60,000 annual income, $20,000 in savings, is offered a $50,000 personal loan at 9% interest over 5 years. Michael uses the money to buy a new BMW, take a European vacation, and upgrade his apartment furniture. He feels successful and happy, for about 6 months. Then the novelty fades, the payments continue, and he begins to feel trapped. By year 3, he's refinanced the loan twice, added more debt to cover the payments, and is significantly worse off than before. His net worth is negative, his stress is high, and he has nothing to show for his borrowing. Rachel, also 30 years old, with the same income, savings, and loan terms, uses the money to start a small business. She purchases used equipment, builds a website, and funds 6 months of marketing. She works nights and weekends to build her client base. By year 3, the business is generating $85,000 in annual revenue. She's paid off the loan entirely and is considering expanding. Her net worth is $75,000, she has diversified income streams, and her stress is manageable because she has growing assets. The lesson: same loan, same terms, same starting point. The difference is entirely the result of mindset, strategy, and execution. Michael borrowed for consumption, Rachel borrowed for creation. One is trapped, one is thriving. Context for urgency: the 2026 reality. The AI disruption. By 2026, artificial intelligence has reshaped the employment landscape dramatically. The World Economic Forum estimates that AI and automation will displace 85 million jobs globally by 2025 while creating 97 million new roles, but the transition period is brutal. Workers whose skills are being automated face sudden income disruption with no guarantee of re-employment. Patricia, a 48-year-old legal secretary, lost her position when her law firm implemented an AI document processing system. Her $62,000 salary vanished overnight. At her age, with skills that are increasingly automated, she faces a difficult job market. She has a mortgage, a car loan, and her youngest child is in college. Her emergency fund lasted 6 months. She's now considering taking on additional debt to survive the transition, but she needs to be extremely strategic about how she borrows. The inflation equation. Inflation continues to erode purchasing power. The Federal Reserve's 2% target has proven elusive, with core inflation hovering around 3.5% in 2026. Savings accounts yielding 4 to 5% barely keep pace. Traditional safe investments no longer provide the security they once did. David and Jennifer, a married couple in their 60s, did everything right. They saved diligently, lived within their means, and accumulated $450,000 in retirement savings. When David was forced into early retirement due to health issues, they expected their savings to provide $30,000 annually through careful withdrawals. But inflation has reduced their purchasing power by 15% over the past 3 years. Their fixed income from Social Security and a small pension hasn't kept pace. They're now considering a reverse mortgage on their home, a strategic debt decision that, while risky, might be the best option available. The speed of change. Opportunities in 2026 move faster than savings can accumulate. The window to capitalize on emerging technologies, market shifts, and new business models often closes before traditional saving can fund the venture. This creates a paradox: those who can act quickly with available capital capture the opportunities, while those who wait find the opportunities have passed. Elena, a 35-year-old graphic designer, identified a market opportunity in AI-assisted corporate training materials. She needed $40,000 to build a prototype and launch a marketing campaign. She had $25,000 in savings. She could wait 18 months to accumulate the remaining $15,000, but her market analysis suggested competitors would enter the space within 12 months. Alternatively, she could take on debt to fund the venture now. Her decision to borrow strategically could determine whether she builds a successful business or watches the opportunity pass. Waiting is no longer neutral. Waiting is a decision. Every day you wait to act on a sound opportunity is a day you've decided not to pursue it. In a fast-moving economy, indecision is a choice, and often the costliest one. The roadmap, what this blueprint will cover. This blueprint guides you through 20 progressive chapters that build a complete framework for thinking about and using debt strategically. Part 1 covers mindset foundations. Part 2 covers the strategic framework. Part 3 covers inner development. Part 4 covers operational discipline. Part 5 brings it all together in a culmination of everything you've learned. 19 principles anchor each chapter, giving you memorable guidelines you can apply immediately. The thesis of this blueprint. Debt doesn't decide your future. Your decisions decide what debt becomes. This isn't a philosophy of reckless borrowing. It's a recognition that avoiding debt entirely isn't always the best strategy, especially in a world where opportunities move faster than savings accumulate. The goal isn't to escape debt, it's to use debt strategically when it makes sense and to avoid it when it doesn't. By the end of this blueprint, you'll understand debt differently. You'll see it not as a source of stress to be avoided but as a potential tool to be used. You'll know when to borrow, when to pay down, when to consolidate, and when to walk away. More importantly, you'll understand the psychology that drives financial decisions and how to align your behavior with your long-term goals. Chapter 1: The Lie You Were Told About Debt. The Incomplete Belief. When Kevin graduated from college in 2015, his father gave him the standard financial advice: stay out of debt, save your money, and work hard. Kevin followed this advice faithfully. He paid off his $28,000 in student loans aggressively in 3 years. He avoided credit cards. He saved diligently. By 2026, Kevin is 32 years old, earning $68,000 annually, with $35,000 in savings and no debt. On paper, he's followed the advice perfectly. But Kevin feels financially stuck. He can't afford a down payment on a house in his city. His savings are being eroded by inflation. He's watched opportunities pass him by because he couldn't afford to invest in himself or his ideas. Kevin's story illustrates the problem with the standard advice: stay out of debt sounds responsible, but it's incomplete. It teaches avoidance, not understanding. It provides a rule without context. It fails to explain why debt should be avoided or when it might be appropriate. The problem isn't that Kevin should have taken on more debt. The problem is that he was taught to view debt as a danger to be avoided rather than a tool to be understood. When you only know how to avoid something, you never learn how to use it. And when you don't understand a tool, you can't use it effectively when the situation calls for it. Dr. Sanjay Patel completed his medical residency in 2024 with $380,000 in student loan debt at 6.8% interest. He was accepted into a prestigious fellowship that would significantly advance his career. But the fellowship pays $75,000 annually, less than a living wage in his city. To accept, he would need to defer his student loan payments, allowing interest to accrue. Dr. Patel faced a classic debt dilemma. The debt itself was a sign of his investment in his education, and the fellowship would ultimately increase his earning potential. But taking on the fellowship meant accepting that his total debt would grow significantly before he could begin to address it. He needed to understand the strategic implications of his decision, not just the emotional reaction to the debt. Fear without knowledge, the paralysis problem. Chloe is a 29-year-old teacher with $42,000 in student loans at 5.5% interest. She receives a small inheritance of $15,000. Her financial advisor suggests she put the money toward her highest interest debt. Her friend suggests she invest it in a mutual fund. Her mother suggests she use it as a down payment on a house. Chloe is so overwhelmed by the competing advice that she does nothing. The money sits in a savings account earning 0.5% interest while her student loans accrue 5.5% interest. Chloe's indecision costs her approximately $750 annually in net interest losses. Over 5 years, that's nearly $4,000 in wasted money. But the real cost is psychological. Chloe feels increasingly anxious about money, avoids looking at her statements, and develops what psychologists call financial helplessness. The very fear that was intended to protect her from debt has left her paralyzed and unable to make progress. Understanding debt mechanics. To move past fear, we need to understand the mechanics of debt. Debt equals principal plus principal times interest rate times time. Total interest paid equals principal times interest rate times years. And there's always an opportunity cost. What could you have done with that money instead of paying interest? A $300,000 mortgage at 6.5% interest over 30 years requires monthly payments of $1,896. Total interest paid, $382,600. Total cost, $682,600. But this calculation, while accurate, is incomplete. It doesn't account for property tax and insurance, typically $300 to $500 monthly, maintenance costs of 1 to 3% of home value annually, the opportunity cost of the down payment, potential appreciation of the property, and the tax deduction for mortgage interest. A strategic analysis would consider all these factors. An emotional analysis would simply look at the monthly payment and decide if it's affordable. Understanding your debt fear score. Most people have an irrational relationship with debt. They either fear it too much, avoiding all debt, or too little, accumulating consumer debt without concern. Ask yourself, when you consider taking on debt, do you primarily feel fear, anxiety, excitement, or indifference? What did your parents or caregivers teach you about debt, that it's a danger to avoid, a necessary evil, a tool to use carefully, or just part of life? What's your current total consumer debt? And when considering a purchase over $1,000, do you always save up first, use debt but feel guilty, consider debt and financing options thoughtfully, or use debt without concern? Reflecting honestly on these questions will show you whether you tend toward a healthy approach to debt, a slightly debt-averse approach that might be causing you to miss opportunities, a risk zone where you're carrying too much or using debt unwisely, or a crisis zone where you need professional help. Debt as a neutral tool. A hammer can build a house or break a window. The tool doesn't decide, the user does. This is the fundamental truth about debt. It's neither good nor bad, it's a tool. And like any tool, its value depends entirely on the skill and intention of the person using it. Consider two small business owners. Maria takes a $50,000 business loan to expand her clothing boutique. She uses the money to buy inventory, renovate her space, and hire additional staff. Within 18 months, revenue has increased by $80,000 annually. She pays off the loan early and opens a second location. Maria used debt as a lever to accelerate growth. Jose takes the same $50,000 loan for his similar boutique. He uses the money to buy a luxury vehicle to project success, update his wardrobe, and take a marketing trip that turns into a vacation. The inventory he purchased sits unsold. Revenue remains stagnant. Within 24 months, he's struggling to make payments and is considering closing. Jose used debt as consumption disguised as investment. The difference: Maria had a clear plan for the money and executed systematically. Jose had a vague idea that was undermined by emotional spending. The loan itself was identical, the outcomes were dramatically different. When evaluating any debt, separate the tool from the user. The interest rate, term, and structure are the tool. Your plan, discipline, and execution are the user. The outcome depends on the interaction between them. Consider the explosion of buy now, pay later services like Afterpay, Klarna, and Affirm. These tools are neutral, they provide a way to spread payments over time. But the user's intention matters enormously. Ashley uses these services strategically. She spreads a $1,200 mattress purchase over 4 payments, interest-free. She has the cash in her account but prefers to keep it in a high-yield savings account earning 4.5% interest. She gains $27 over 4 months while preserving liquidity. She uses these plans for planned, budgeted purchases and never misses a payment. Brandon uses them impulsively. He buys clothes, electronics, and entertainment with 3 separate plans. He loses track of his payments and is hit with a $35 late fee on one account. His credit score drops 40 points. The debt accumulates until he's paying $450 monthly on purchases he doesn't even enjoy anymore. The lesson: the same tool, with one user acting intentionally and the other acting emotionally, produces dramatically different results. The emotional borrowing problem. Marcus, a 27-year-old financial analyst, drives a $52,000 BMW. He leased it after his first promotion, rationalizing that he deserved it and that it helped project success to clients. The lease payment is $625 monthly, 14% of his take-home pay. Insurance is another $180 monthly. Maintenance costs average $100 monthly. Total cost, $905 monthly for transportation. Marcus's employer offers a remote work policy. He drives to the office 3 days weekly, using a car that costs him over $10,000 annually for 8,000 miles of driving. That's $1.25 per mile, more than 4 times the IRS reimbursement rate. Marcus could sell the BMW, buy a practical used car for $15,000, and save $600 monthly that could fund a retirement account or home down payment. But Marcus isn't thinking about the numbers. He's thinking about how the car makes him feel. When he pulls up to a client meeting, he feels like a success. When he visits his hometown, he feels like he's made it. His emotional attachment to the car overrides any rational financial analysis. Marcus's borrowing isn't about transportation, it's about identity. He's borrowing not to acquire a vehicle but to project a version of himself that he wants to be seen as. This is the most dangerous kind of debt because it's driven by emotions rather than economics. Samantha and David, a married couple in their early 30s, took a $7,500 vacation to Italy. They charged it to a credit card with an 18.9% APR. They planned to pay it off in 6 months, but then life happened. Samantha needed new tires on her car, their water heater broke, and David's dental work wasn't covered by insurance. The balance grew to $9,200 with interest and fees. 3 years later, they're still paying $200 monthly and have paid over $2,100 in interest. The vacation memories have faded, but the monthly payment remains. Samantha and David's vacation cost them significantly more than the stated price. The mental burden of the lingering debt has strained their marriage. They argue about money, avoid discussing finances, and feel trapped by their decisions. The illusion of progress. Robert and Patricia bought their dream home in 2019 for $425,000. They stretched to afford it, using an FHA loan with 3.5% down and a 4.5% interest rate. The monthly payment was $2,400, 42% of their take-home pay. They rationalized that it was an investment and that they'd grow into it. By 2026, they're drowning. Property taxes have increased, homeowners insurance has jumped, and Robert lost his job during a restructuring. They've used credit cards to cover expenses and taken out a home equity line of credit to consolidate debt. Their mortgage is now $2,900 monthly, and total debt payments consume 70% of their income. They're considering selling the house but are upside down on their mortgage. Robert and Patricia were trapped by the illusion of progress. At first, the house felt like an accomplishment. They felt successful, grown up, established. But progress, real progress, isn't about buying things that make you feel successful. Real progress is about building assets that increase your security, options, and freedom. Their house did the opposite. It reduced their options, increased their stress, and limited their freedom. Looking at the true, all-in cost of that $425,000 house at 4.5% interest over 30 years, including the mortgage payments, property tax, insurance, and maintenance, the grand total comes to over $1 million. Of course, the house may appreciate, and there are tax benefits to home ownership. But Robert and Patricia never did this calculation. They looked at the monthly payment and assumed they could afford it. New questions to ask. If Robert and Patricia had asked different questions, their outcome might have been different. Instead of asking, "Can we afford the monthly payment?" they should have asked, "What is the total cost of this house over 30 years, and is that worth what we get?" Instead of asking, "Will the bank approve us?" they should have asked, "If interest rates rise, property taxes increase, or our income drops, can we still afford this?" Instead of asking, "Do we want this house?" they should have asked, "Is this house a financial asset or a liability that pretends to be an asset?" And instead of asking, "Is buying better than renting?" they should have asked, "What is our net worth situation after 5 years of owning versus renting?" When considering any debt, ask yourself these 5 questions. What is this debt really costing me, factoring in interest, fees, opportunity cost, and the stress cost? What is this debt producing? Is it creating income, skill, or opportunity, or is it funding consumption that will be gone before the debt is repaid? How long will this debt constrain me, and how long will the payment limit my flexibility and options? What kind of debt am I creating? Is it strategic with a clear path to return, or consumption with no path to return? And am I borrowing for progress or for appearance? Is this debt moving me toward my actual goals, or is it about how I want others to see me? Consider Jake, a 31-year-old engineer who values experiences over things. He spends heavily on travel, dining out, and entertainment, rationalizing that he's living life to the fullest. His credit card balance averages $6,000 at 18.9% interest, costing him $1,134 annually in interest. Over 10 years, that's over $11,000 in interest on experiences he doesn't even remember clearly. Jake's problem isn't that he enjoys experiences, it's that he finances them with debt rather than saving for them. His desire to live in the moment is actually stealing from his future. Each $100 dinner charged to his card costs him nearly $119 if paid off in a year. Over 20 years of compounding, that same $100 could have grown to $466. He's paying a premium for experiences he could have saved for and enjoyed without the lingering cost. Principle 1: Never borrow money to impress people who are not responsible for your future. When you borrow to impress others, you're making a trade, temporary social approval for long-term financial constraint. The people you're trying to impress won't be there to help you make the payments, won't contribute to your retirement, and won't share the stress of your debt burden. Their opinion matters far less than your financial freedom. Taylor, a young attorney, felt pressure to appear successful to attract clients. She leased a luxury car, bought high-end suits, and joined an exclusive country club. Her monthly expenses for what she called image maintenance exceeded $2,500. When she reviewed her practice's performance, she realized the image wasn't bringing in clients, her competence was. She switched to a practical car, shopped at discount stores for professional clothing, and canceled the club membership. Her practice's revenue remained stable, and she saved $30,000 annually that she redirected to paying off law school debt. That same money, invested at 8% annual returns for 30 years, would grow to $340,000. The decision to look successful cost Taylor $340,000 in future wealth. She was paying a massive premium for an image that didn't actually benefit her business. Take a look at your own expenses. Which of them are about image rather than value? Your clothing and accessories, your car, your home and furnishings, your memberships and entertaining, your gadgets and upgrades. Identify one image expense you can reduce or eliminate, and redirect that money to debt repayment or investment. Even redirecting a modest amount, invested consistently, can grow into six figures over a decade. Chapter Summary: The standard advice to stay out of debt is incomplete because it teaches avoidance without understanding. Fear without knowledge creates paralysis, and paralysis keeps people financially stuck. Debt is a neutral tool, the outcome depends on the user's intention and skill, not the tool itself. Most people use debt emotionally, to feel better, look better, or escape pressure, which leads to negative consequences. The illusion of progress, borrowing for lifestyle, feels like success but creates future constraint. Ask yourself what this is costing, what it's producing, how long it will constrain you, and whether you're borrowing for progress or appearance. And remember Principle 1, never borrow to impress people who are not responsible for your future. Ask yourself, how has fear of debt, or lack of fear, affected my financial decisions? Have I ever borrowed for image rather than value, and what was the outcome? What purchases have I made that felt like progress but actually constrained me? Do I think of debt as a tool or as something to avoid at all costs? And what's one debt-related decision I made emotionally that I would make differently now? Chapter 2, The Line Between Burden and Leverage. The Invisible Line. Two entrepreneurs start businesses on the same day. Both secure $100,000 business loans at 7.5% interest with 5-year terms. One business fails within 2 years, leaving the entrepreneur with personal liability and a destroyed credit score. The other business succeeds, generating $200,000 in annual profit and creating lasting wealth. What separates them? The system didn't change. The loan terms were identical. The difference lies entirely in how the debt was used, the line between burden and leverage. The line is simple: borrowing for consumption creates burden, while borrowing for creation creates leverage. Consumption borrowing takes money from the future to enjoy the present. Creation borrowing directs money with the expectation that it produces income, skill, access, or opportunity. Dr. Amanda Chen, a 32-year-old pediatrician, has $225,000 in medical school loans at 6.5% interest. Her monthly payment is $1,420. She struggles with whether this debt is good or bad. The answer depends on how the debt is evaluated. From a consumption view, she borrowed to fund her education, a necessary burden. From a creation view, she invested in a career that generates $150,000 annually, leverage that enabled her to acquire an income-generating asset. The reality is that the debt is both. It was a necessary investment in her human capital, but the degree to which it's good or bad depends on additional factors. Did she choose a specialty that pays well? Did she attend an expensive private school when a less expensive state school would have sufficed? Is she working full-time in her field? The same debt can be leverage or burden depending on the context and execution. Consumption borrowing, the hidden cost. Lisa, a 28-year-old graphic designer, moved to a new city. She needed furniture for her apartment. She had $2,000 in savings but saw an ad for a no-interest for 24 months furniture financing plan. She bought $6,500 worth of furniture, rationalizing that she was being smart by using the interest-free offer and keeping her cash for emergencies. She missed the fine print: if not paid in full by 24 months, interest at 28.9% would apply retroactively. She incurred delivery and account setup fees. She added extras she didn't need. And she used the cash she'd kept to cover a car repair and a veterinary bill. At 23 months, Lisa still owes $2,800 on the furniture. The promotion has ended, and the retroactive interest will be applied. She faces thousands more in interest if she doesn't pay the balance within the month. She can't pay it, so she's hit with the interest. Her $6,500 furniture will end up costing her over $11,000 total, 74% more than she expected. She's now paying $300 monthly for furniture that's already showing signs of wear. Every $100 monthly spent on consumption debt, if invested instead at 8% for 10 years, would grow to $18,000. Consumption debt doesn't just cost interest, it costs the opportunity to build wealth. Consumption borrowing isn't always bad. We all need cars, homes, and sometimes even vacations. But it becomes dangerous when it's used for wants rather than needs, when it extends beyond a reasonable timeline, when it displaces savings, and when it creates a cycle of dependency where additional debt is required just to cover unexpected expenses. Derek, a 33-year-old project manager, leases a $45,000 SUV for $580 monthly. He views this as affordable because it fits in his budget. But the lease has additional costs: a down payment, an acquisition fee, a disposition fee, and mileage overage charges. Over 3 years, his actual cost is nearly $24,000 for a vehicle he doesn't own and must return. Derek could instead buy a 3-year-old used SUV, finance it over 5 years, and own it outright afterward, with meaningful remaining value. The lease costs him thousands more with no asset to show for it, while the purchase leaves him with an asset worth over $10,000. The cheaper option saves money and provides eventual ownership. Creation borrowing, the power of leverage. When Carla started her catering business, she had $5,000 in savings. She secured a $25,000 business loan at 8.5% interest to purchase equipment and launch marketing. Her monthly payment was $513 for 5 years. She used the money for equipment, a commercial kitchen rental deposit, marketing materials and a website, initial inventory, and working capital. Her revenue grew steadily each year, and by year 5 the business generated $150,000 annually. She paid off the loan in 42 months, ahead of schedule, saving thousands in interest. The initial $25,000 loan helped create a business worth $350,000. Carla's debt was a lever that multiplied her efforts. Creation debt works when 3 conditions are met. First, clarity of return. You know exactly how the borrowed money will produce value, not, "I hope this works," but, "I have a plan that predicts this outcome." Second, control. You can influence the outcome through your actions. Success doesn't depend entirely on external factors. Third, time alignment. The return comes before or matches the repayment obligation. Mismatched timelines create pressure that leads to bad decisions. Marcus borrowed $40,000 at 6.5% to complete a master's degree in data analytics. His salary jumped from $65,000 to $95,000 after graduation, a $30,000 annual increase. Over a working lifetime, that increase adds up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in additional income, dwarfing the cost of the loan. This investment had a return in the thousands of percent over 30 years. Even accounting for taxes, career breaks, and other factors, the return is substantial. Marcus's debt was clearly leverage. Education debt becomes burden, however, when the degree doesn't lead to increased earning potential, when the student borrowed more than necessary, when the repayment timeline doesn't align with the return, or when the student didn't complete the degree. Jessica attended a private law school costing $65,000 annually. She graduated with $230,000 in debt at 6.9% interest. She passed the bar and is working as a public defender earning $58,000 annually. Her monthly loan payment is $2,600, 54% of her take-home pay. She's caught in a debt spiral. She can't afford to take a higher-paying private practice job because she's committed to public service, hoping for loan forgiveness whose future is uncertain. She's trapped between her commitment to service and her crushing debt burden. Education debt is only leverage when the income increase justifies the cost. If the return doesn't materialize, the debt becomes a burden that restricts choices and opportunities. Priya's consulting business had been growing steadily for 2 years. She had a wait list of clients and was turning away work, but she was one person who could only bill so many hours. She borrowed $75,000 at 7.5% over 5 years to hire 2 assistants, upgrade software, and take a larger office. Her profit increased from $80,000 to $140,000 annually, and the loan paid for itself in 15 months. Priya's debt was clearly leverage. It multiplied her existing success rather than gambling on uncertain outcomes. Case study: the 2 borrowers. Let's examine 2 people who take identical $50,000 loans at 8% interest over 5 years, and follow different paths. Michael, the consumption borrower, spends the money on a luxury car, home renovation, a vacation, and miscellaneous consumption. 5 years later, his assets are worth a fraction of what he spent, and after accounting for what he's paid on the loan, he's tens of thousands of dollars worse off than when he started. Rachel, the creation borrower, spends the money on equipment for a side business, marketing, training, and working capital. 5 years later, her business has generated significant profit and sold for a strong return. After accounting for what she's paid on the loan, she's tens of thousands of dollars better off than when she started. The difference between them adds up to nearly $80,000 over 5 years. Same starting point, different thinking, different result. Several variables matter here. The rate of return versus the rate of interest. If borrowed money produces an 8% return but costs 12% interest, you're losing money every year. If it produces a 20% return and costs 8%, you're gaining. The time horizon. Short-term borrowing for long-term assets works well, long-term borrowing for short-term assets works poorly. Personal factors, your discipline, follow-through, and ability to execute the plan matter as much as the numbers. And market conditions. The best plan can fail due to economic downturns, industry changes, or competitive pressures, which is why risk management is essential. Tom borrowed $100,000 to launch a restaurant. His business plan projected profitability in 18 months. Instead, the restaurant opened 8 months late, lost $40,000 in the first year, and closed after 14 months. Tom lost his investment, his savings, and his credit rating. He overestimated demand, underestimated competition, had no restaurant experience, and didn't maintain sufficient working capital. His failure was caused by execution risk and unrealistic assumptions. His debt was gambling, not leverage, because the conditions for strategic debt weren't met. Key evaluation questions. Ask what this is going to produce. For a car, don't just think transportation, ask whether it does something your current car can't, whether it will last significantly longer, or reduce your costs. For education, don't just think career advancement, ask what specific opportunities will open and what income increase you can expect. For a business investment, ask what specific revenue or profit increase will result, and when the return will begin. Ask how long this payment will limit you. Calculate the monthly payment as a percentage of your income, and project how long that payment will constrain your choices. Ask whether you're buying something that grows or fades. Assets that grow include education that increases earning capacity, businesses that generate income, appreciating real estate, and productive investments. Assets that fade include cars, electronics, furniture, vacations, meals, and entertainment. And apply the 5-year test. Will this decision look good or bad 5 years from now? If you're borrowing for a car, will you still be excited about it once it's worth a fraction of what you paid? If you're borrowing for education, will the degree have opened opportunities that justify the cost? If you're borrowing for a business, will it be generating returns that justify the risk? Sarah is considering a $30,000 kitchen renovation. She's planning to sell her house in 3 years, well before she'd fully enjoy the renovation, and the next owner will likely renovate to their own taste anyway. The renovation doesn't align with her timeline, so it's a bad decision. The money would be better spent on minimal updates and invested elsewhere. If the debt doesn't have a clear path to return, it's not leverage, it's liability. The discipline gap. Understanding the difference between consumption and creation debt is one thing, consistently acting on that understanding is another. This is where most people fail. Philip decided to borrow $20,000 at 7% to start a side business. He had a solid plan, realistic projections, and commitment. But within 6 months, he'd used part of the business funds on personal expenses, hadn't started marketing because he was too busy, and had upgraded to nicer equipment that wasn't strictly necessary. Revenue was minimal, and he was losing confidence. Philip's knowledge was solid, but his discipline was weak. By the time he realized what had happened, the debt had become a burden rather than leverage. Ask yourself honestly, have you consistently followed through on financial plans you've made? Do you make decisions based on emotion or data? Have you ever missed a payment or exceeded a budget? Do you avoid looking at your finances because it's unpleasant? Building discipline starts small. Identify one financial behavior you need to improve, create a specific measurable goal, choose a way to track it, find someone to hold you accountable, and review your progress regularly, adjusting as needed. Principle 2, never take on debt without defining what it will return. For any significant debt, over 10% of your annual income, write yourself a clear return statement. Say specifically how much you're borrowing, at what rate, over what term, and for what purpose. Define exactly what return you expect, through what mechanism, and by what timeline. And define what you'll do if the return doesn't materialize. When Marcus took out his $45,000 MBA loan, his return statement was optimistic, expecting a $35,000 annual income increase within 2 years. The actual outcome was a $15,000 increase after 3 years, well short of expectations. But because he had a plan with a contingency, he didn't panic. He pursued additional certifications, considered side consulting, and stayed on track. The return statement isn't about perfect prediction, it's about conscious decision-making. When you define the expected return, you're more likely to achieve it and better equipped to respond if you don't. Chapter summary: the line between burden and leverage is simple. Consumption borrowing creates burden, creation borrowing creates leverage. Consumption borrowing takes money from the future to enjoy the present, reducing flexibility and options. Creation borrowing directs money with the expectation of producing income, skill, access, or opportunity. Strategic debt requires clarity of return, control over the outcome, and time alignment between repayment and return. The same debt can be burden or leverage depending on execution and context. And remember principle 2, never take on debt without defining what it will return. Ask yourself, what debts are currently on my balance sheet? Are they consumption or creation? Have I taken on debt for which I couldn't define the return, and what happened? What debt decisions have I made that were driven by emotion rather than strategy? Do I consistently act on my financial understanding, or is there a gap between what I know and what I do? Chapter 3, the psychology of borrowing. Core idea: debt is a behavioral issue. Emma is a 26-year-old who works in a stable government job, earning $65,000. She's smart, educated, and rational, except when it comes to money. Her credit card balances total $8,000 at 22.5% interest. She knows better, yet she repeats the same patterns of impulsive spending. Emma's problem isn't financial, it's behavioral. She understands the math of credit card debt perfectly. The problem is psychological. Impulses, emotions, and patterns override her rational knowledge. Money doesn't decide, people do. And people are emotional before they're logical. Traditional finance assumes people make rational decisions. Behavioral finance recognizes that we make emotional decisions and rationalize them afterward. This is why two people with the same financial knowledge and resources can have dramatically different financial outcomes. The real reasons people take on bad debt. The first reason is stress. When we're stressed, we seek immediate relief, and spending provides a dopamine hit that temporarily reduces stress. The problem is that spending creates financial stress that leads to more stress, a vicious cycle. Tyler, a 42-year-old construction project manager, is constantly stressed from long hours and job insecurity. He decompresses by online shopping, buying things he doesn't need. The spending provides temporary pleasure, but then the bill arrives, adding financial stress to his existing stress. Surveys show that people with high financial stress are far more likely to make impulse purchases, reinforcing the cycle. The second reason is comparison. Social media has amplified the comparison trap exponentially. We see curated highlights of others' lives and feel inadequate. Natalie, a 29-year-old marketing manager, scrolls through Instagram and sees former classmates on luxury vacations and colleagues with new cars and homes. She feels behind, so she books a vacation she can't afford and buys clothing she doesn't need. The bills arrive, and she feels worse. Research shows that heavy social media users are significantly more likely to carry credit card debt than light users. The third reason is impatience. We want what we want now, not later, and debt enables us to get things now and pay later. Ryan and his wife want a larger house that stretches their budget, and market pressure is pushing them to act now rather than wait 2 years to save more and reduce the loan burden. Speed without foundation always collapses. Borrowing to accelerate artificially, instead of building patiently, doesn't move you forward, it just moves your payment timeline forward without actually advancing your financial position. The fourth reason is fear of missing out. This drives debt through investment FOMO, everyone's making money so I need to get in now, and lifestyle FOMO, everyone's upgrading so I need to keep up. Carlos, a 33-year-old accountant, watched colleagues make money in cryptocurrency and felt he was missing out. He invested using a personal loan at 11% interest, the market crashed, and he lost both his investment and still owed the loan, a total loss far exceeding what he initially borrowed. He invested not based on analysis but on FOMO, he was gambling, not investing, and his debt amplified the loss. The fifth and most dangerous reason is identity. Borrowing to match a perceived identity shifts focus from consequences to perception. We think less about whether we can afford something and more about how it will make us look. Jeremy, a 37-year-old attorney, drives an expensive car, belongs to a country club, and wears designer clothing, spending well over $2,500 monthly on what he calls image, while barely making minimum payments on $45,000 of debt. His debt is driven by his image of himself as a successful attorney. He's not borrowing to build wealth, he's borrowing to look wealthy. The irony is that looking wealthy is preventing him from becoming wealthy. You are not just managing money, you are managing your impulses. Knowledge without discipline is powerless. Understanding the psychology of borrowing is essential to changing your financial behavior. The psychology of debt decisions. Our brains respond differently depending on context. Loss aversion means we feel losses more intensely than gains, which can lead us to avoid confronting debt problems because they're painful to face. Present bias means we value immediate rewards more than future ones, which is why we choose the pleasure of a purchase now over the pain of future payments. Optimism bias means we believe we'll be more successful in the future than we are today, leading us to take on debt we can't currently afford. And the sunk cost fallacy means that once we've made a financial decision, we keep investing in it even when it's failing, because we don't want to feel we've wasted what we already spent. James, a 45-year-old real estate investor, bought a rental property that turned into a money pit. He'd already spent $30,000 on repairs, and it still needed $20,000 more while being worth less than he paid. His thinking was, I've already put $50,000 into this, if I sell now I've wasted it all. That's the sunk cost fallacy at work. The wise decision is to separate the past investment from the current decision. The 50,000 is gone regardless of what he does next. The real question is whether the property will produce future returns that justify additional investment. The comparison trap. Emma, a 31-year-old teacher, feels like everyone she knows is doing better than she is. Her college roommate married a venture capitalist, her brother bought a house at 28, her colleague has a thriving side business, her cousin travels internationally several times a year. By objective measures, Emma is doing fine on her teacher's salary. But comparison makes her feel inadequate, and she's considering taking on debt to keep up appearances. The truth is, Emma doesn't know the full financial reality behind any of these situations, the risk her roommate's husband takes on, her brother's mortgage and maintenance costs, her colleague's actual profit margins, or how her cousin finances those vacations. We compare our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel. This creates unrealistic standards that drive unhealthy financial behavior. Borrowing creates an illusion of progress. You feel like you're moving forward, but you've only moved your payment timeline forward, not your actual position. 3 psychological traps. The first is urgency, the limited time trap. This deal is only available this week, act now. Cheryl, a 38-year-old nurse, went into a furniture store just to browse and was told about a 24-hour, half-off promotion. She bought a set she didn't need, on credit, because the urgency triggered a fear of missing a good deal. The hidden truth was that the sale price was marked up from the item's actual value. If it's truly a good deal, it will still be a good deal tomorrow, or next week, or next month. Good opportunities don't require immediate action. The second is normalization, the everyone does it trap. Justin, a 27-year-old sales representative, rationalizes a $700 car payment because everyone around him drives luxury cars. But normal is not optimal. The average American carries over $100,000 in debt, and following the average leads to average results, which in debt terms are often financially devastating. Stop comparing yourself to your peers' consumption levels and decide what's optimal for your own situation. The third is emotional justification, the I deserve this trap. This is the most dangerous because it feels true and right. Maria, a 44-year-old small business owner who has worked incredibly hard for 15 years, decides she deserves an expensive vacation, a kitchen renovation, and a luxury car, on top of debt she's already carrying. The question isn't whether Maria deserves nice things, it's whether her future self deserves freedom. Debt transfers the cost of present decisions to your future self. Every dollar you spend on debt-financed consumption is a dollar your future self must earn and pay back with interest, and your future self won't thank you for choices driven by emotional justification. The 3-question pause. Before any borrowing decision, ask yourself 3 questions. What am I feeling right now? Excitement, stress, fear, pressure. If you're feeling a strong emotion, wait until it passes. Never make a borrowing decision in an emotional state. Will this decision matter in 5 years? If not, reconsider borrowing for it. And would I make this decision without the pressure? If you wouldn't do it without the pressure, don't do it with the pressure. Real opportunities survive evaluation, bad opportunities depend on urgency. Ashley was offered a once-in-a-lifetime real estate investment opportunity, with a 48-hour deadline and heavy pressure tactics. She used the 3-question pause. She recognized her excitement was being manipulated by artificial urgency, she recognized the decision would matter in 5 years so deserved careful analysis, and she realized she wouldn't invest in this without the pressure. She passed. The deal later failed, costing other investors significant money. If you can't make the decision without the pressure is a sign you shouldn't make it. Principle 3, never make a borrowing decision in an emotional state. Identify the emotion you're feeling. Create distance, walk away, sleep on it, talk to someone you trust. Wait 24 to 72 hours, real opportunities survive the wait, bad opportunities depend on urgency. Then return with a clear mind and reevaluate as if you've never seen the opportunity before. Create a personal rule, never make a borrowing decision over $500 without 24 hours of reflection. Write down the date, the item, the cost, and why you want it, then wait. Many people who use this rule find they end up canceling most of their impulse purchases. It's a simple but powerful tool for controlling emotional spending. Chapter Summary: Debt is a behavioral issue, not just a financial issue. People are emotional before they're logical. The real reasons people take on bad debt include stress, comparison, impatience, fear of missing out, and identity. The comparison trap makes us feel inadequate by comparing our reality to others' curated highlights. The three psychological traps are urgency, normalization, and emotional justification. And remember Principle 3, never make a borrowing decision in an emotional state, create distance and return when clear-headed. Ask yourself, what emotions typically drive my spending decisions? Have I ever made a borrowing decision driven primarily by emotion, and what happened? Do I use the normalization justification, telling myself everyone has payments? Do I reward myself with debt-financed purchases I can't afford? What would change in my financial life if I always made borrowing decisions with a clear, calm mind? Chapter 4, Strategic Debt, When Borrowing Becomes Power. Mindset Shift, From Avoidance to Strategy. Maya, a talented software developer, has a great idea for a mobile app but can't afford the income drop needed to build it full-time. Trying to play it safe, she builds it in her spare time over 2 years, but by then 3 competitors have launched similar apps and the opportunity has passed. Had she instead borrowed a modest amount to cover her reduced income while building full-time, she could have launched in 6 months and generated tens of thousands in revenue in the first year, at the cost of a small amount of interest, a tiny price for a business worth far more. Maya's avoidance of debt cost her a business opportunity. The mindset shift is powerful, from "how do I avoid debt" to "when does debt actually make sense?" The 3 conditions for strategic debt. The first condition is clarity of return. You must know exactly how borrowed money will produce value, not hope, not maybe, but a clear specific understanding of the mechanism. Javier took a $30,000 loan to start a food truck business with only a vague plan to sell tacos to construction workers, no detailed projections, no marketing strategy, no contingency plan. The business failed within 7 months. Before borrowing, you need to answer what specific mechanism will generate return, what financial outcome you expect, what the timeline is, and what the downside looks like if the return doesn't materialize. The second condition is control. You must be able to influence the outcome through your actions. Ricardo borrowed $10,000 to invest in cryptocurrency, which crashed 80% within 3 months. He had no influence over the price, his success depended entirely on market forces beyond his control. That was gambling, not leverage. Strategic debt must be used for activities where your actions determine outcomes, education leading to a specific career path, a business where you control marketing and operations, equipment enabling work you'll do, or real estate where you can add value directly. The third condition is time alignment. The return must come before or match the repayment obligation. Elena borrowed $50,000 at 8% for a business projected to be profitable in 18 months, but the loan required payments from day 1. By month 12 she was struggling and took on additional high-interest debt to cover the payments, creating a debt spiral. Match your debt timeline to your return timeline, short-term debt for short-term returns, long-term debt for long-term returns, deferred payments for delayed returns. Miss one condition and the structure weakens, miss all 3 and it collapses. Strategic debt requires all 3, clarity, control, and time alignment. Wealthy mindset. How the rich think about debt. Meet Robert, a wealthy entrepreneur with a net worth of $8 million. He carries a credit card balance and a mortgage, alongside substantial cash and investments. Why does he carry debt at all? His credit card is at a 0% introductory rate he'll pay off before it expires, using the bank's money interest-free. His mortgage is at a low fixed rate while his investments earn considerably more, so he's earning the spread. His business debts fund projects generating returns well above their interest cost. The wealthy don't borrow to escape their situation, they borrow to improve their position. They prepare, then act with precision. Preparation always comes before leverage. They view debt as a tool to be used strategically, evaluating it by its net benefit. Does the investment produce more than the debt costs? The popular rich dad philosophy contains real truth. Strategic debt creates assets that produce income, while consumption debt creates liabilities that drain income. Borrowing to buy a rental property that generates net income, even after the loan payment, produces a positive net return plus appreciation over time. Borrowing to buy a car that depreciates the moment you drive it off the lot produces nothing but a loss. The wealthy aren't debt-free, they're strategic about debt. Principle 4, never use debt to create opportunity, use it to expand opportunity that already exists. Strategic debt doesn't create opportunity from nothing, it expands opportunities that already exist. You shouldn't borrow to create success, you should borrow to accelerate success that's already happening. Christina borrowed $75,000 to open a yoga studio. She had excellent teaching credentials and a loyal following, but no business experience, no detailed plan, and was borrowing based on passion rather than strategy. The studio closed after 18 months, leaving her with $90,000 in debt. A smarter approach would have been to start small, renting space by the hour, building a client base while working part-time, learning business basics, and saving capital before opening a studio with a proven model. Compare that to David, a successful real estate agent consistently closing $2 million in annual sales, who borrowed $50,000 to expand into commercial real estate, investing in marketing, training, and office space. Within 2 years, his commercial business generated $150,000 in additional annual revenue, and the loan paid for itself within a year. David didn't borrow to create a business, he borrowed to expand a business that already existed, with proven success and a track record. Before borrowing, ask yourself, am I expanding an existing success or trying to create a success that doesn't yet exist? If you're expanding, you have proven success and a track record, and debt can accelerate your growth. If you're creating, you're hoping for success without evidence, and debt is more likely to become burden than leverage. Ask yourself, have you proven the concept on a small scale? Do you understand the market, customer, and competition? Do you have a track record of similar success? Have you learned the basics without debt? Is your plan detailed and realistic? Lena started a side business making organic dog treats with just $200, selling at a farmer's market and reinvesting profits as she grew. After 12 months of proven, growing revenue, she borrowed $5,000 to lease commercial kitchen space and buy bulk ingredients. Revenue more than doubled the following year. Lena proved her concept without debt and then used debt to expand her proven success, meeting all 3 conditions for strategic debt. Chapter Summary: Strategic debt moves from, how do I avoid debt, to, when does debt actually make sense? The 3 conditions for strategic debt are clarity of return, control over outcome, and time alignment between repayment and return. Wealthy people use debt strategically, borrowing when the return exceeds the cost and avoiding it when it doesn't. And remember Principle 4, never use debt to create opportunity, use it to expand opportunity that already exists. Ask yourself, have I ever taken on debt for an opportunity that didn't yet exist, and what happened? Which of my current debts meet the 3 conditions for strategic debt? How can I start proving concepts on a small scale before borrowing to expand? Chapter 5, Risk, the truth most people avoid. Core premise: there is no risk-free debt. When Lisa took out her $30,000 business loan, she didn't think about risk, only about her new website, her new customers, and her future success. 14 months later, her business failed. She lost her own savings, plus the loan, plus credit card debt accumulated during the struggle, a total loss of over $50,000. What Lisa denied was the possibility of failure. She didn't plan for it, didn't build a contingency into her finances, and didn't have an exit strategy. In her mind, failure wasn't an option, which meant she was completely unprepared when it arrived. There is no risk-free debt. Every loan carries risk. The goal isn't to avoid all risk, which also avoids growth, but to manage risk effectively. 3 types of risk. Financial risk asks whether you can afford the downside, not the best case, but the worst case. Jake and Emily bought a $550,000 house assuming both incomes would remain stable. When Jake was laid off 18 months later, the mortgage consumed most of Emily's income alone. They went through savings, then credit cards, then family loans, and eventually had to sell at a $60,000 loss. They planned for the best case but didn't prepare for the worst. A strong strategy survives imperfection, it doesn't rely on perfection. Execution risk asks whether you'll actually follow through on your plan. Marcus took a $15,000 loan for a side business with a solid plan, but within 3 months he'd spent part of it on personal expenses, worked far fewer hours than planned, and delayed his launch. His execution didn't match his plan. He overestimated his discipline and underperformed, turning the loan into a burden. External risk includes market shifts, economic changes, industry disruptions, and other factors beyond your control. Elena opened a travel agency in 2019 with a solid plan and strong experience, and then COVID hit, international travel stopped, and her business collapsed within months. She couldn't have predicted a pandemic, but she could have planned for business interruption with a contingency fund or a line of credit. In 2026, external risks include AI and automation disrupting industries, climate change affecting real estate, regulatory changes, demographic shifts, and rapid technological change. Plan for instability rather than assuming stability. Reframe, risk management, not risk avoidance. Gloria has $100,000 in a savings account earning 0.5% interest. She's terrified of investing because she's afraid of losing money. But her safe approach is actually risky, inflation is eroding her purchasing power every year. She's trading one kind of risk, investment volatility, for another, inflation erosion. The solution isn't to avoid risk entirely but to manage the risks you take. The risk management framework has 5 steps. Define the risk specifically. Estimate the likelihood. Assess the impact. Mitigate the risk with specific actions. And accept the residual risk that remains, deciding if it's acceptable. Maria is considering a $50,000 business loan. She works through the framework for each major risk, her business not generating expected revenue, a personal health issue preventing execution, and market shifts making the business obsolete, estimating likelihood, assessing impact, and building specific mitigation plans for each. She proceeds with a reduced loan amount and stronger contingency plans, prepared for various scenarios rather than surprised by them. Principle 5. Never take on risk you haven't fully defined. For any significant debt, write yourself a risk statement. List the specific risks, estimate the likelihood of each, describe the impact, outline your mitigation plan, and state your decision about accepting the residual risk. When Aaron took out a $25,000 car loan, he never considered what would happen if he lost his job, if the car was in an accident, if rates rose, or if his circumstances changed. 14 months later he lost his job, couldn't make the payments, ruined his credit, and had to sell the car at a loss. He'd taken on risk he hadn't defined. Scenario planning tool. The best case, expected case, worst case framework helps you prepare for various outcomes. For the best case, ask what success looks like and how you'll maximize it. For the expected case, ask what the likely, realistic outcome is. For the worst case, ask what the worst realistic scenario looks like, what its impact would be, and whether you'd still be okay. James is considering a rental property investment with a substantial down payment and mortgage. Working through best, expected, and worst-case scenarios for appreciation, rent, and expenses, he finds that even in the worst case, he can cover the losses. He proceeds with the investment. The key test question is simple: am I still okay in the worst-case scenario? If not, adjust, scale down, or wait. Chapter summary: there is no risk-free debt, the goal is risk management, not risk avoidance. The 3 types of risk are financial, can you afford the downside, execution, will you follow through, and external factors beyond your control. Denial of risk is dangerous, accept that things can go wrong and plan accordingly. Scenario planning, best, expected, and worst case, helps you prepare for various outcomes. And remember Principle 5, never take on risk you haven't fully defined. Defined risk can be managed, undefined risk manages you. Ask yourself, have I ever taken on debt without considering the risks, and what happened? What risks am I currently taking with my financial decisions? Do I plan for the best case or the worst case, and how does this affect my decisions? Chapter 6, Build the system before you borrow. Core idea, control before borrowing. Marcus has been financially getting by for years, no budget, no tracking, no emergency fund, relying on credit cards for unexpected expenses. His financial system is reactive, fragile, and stressed. When he wants to borrow $10,000 for a side business, his existing system is already strained, and adding more debt would only increase that strain. Pressure tests your system, not your idea. If your system is already strained, adding debt will only increase the strain. The result, the system breaks, the debt becomes a burden, and the idea fails, not because the idea was bad, but because the system couldn't support it. Build the system before you borrow. 3 layers of a strong financial system. The first layer is stability, breathing room. Patricia and David have almost nothing in savings, $12,000 in credit card debt, and only a $300 monthly cushion between income and expenses. They're one unexpected expense away from crisis. If anything breaks, they'll put it on a credit card, adding to their debt and making their situation worse. Building stability means having an emergency fund of 3 to 6 months of expenses, an income surplus of at least 5 to 10%, the ability to reduce expenses if needed, and available credit that isn't being used. Marcus, from the earlier example, builds stability before borrowing, an emergency fund, a monthly income surplus, reduced credit card debt, and a buffer in checking. Now his system can absorb financial shocks. If something goes wrong with his side business, he has breathing room to adjust. The second layer is separation, clear lines. Samantha runs all her expenses, essential and optional, business and personal, through the same account, and can't tell where her money is going or whether her business is profitable. Creating separation means having distinct accounts for essentials, optional spending, investment, and risk or savings, each used only for its designated purpose. Once Samantha implements this system, she knows exactly how much she has for each category and can't accidentally spend rent money on dining out. The third layer is the discipline of tracking. Know your numbers clearly, what you don't track, you don't control. Carlos doesn't track small expenses, coffee, takeout, subscriptions, apps, which quietly add up to hundreds of dollars a month, thousands over a year, tens of thousands over a decade. Once he tracks his spending for 30 days, categorizes it, and identifies the leakage, he cancels unused subscriptions and cuts back, redirecting the savings to debt repayment. A system that only works when things are easy isn't a real system. Real systems hold under pressure, fluctuation, and delay. Test your system by asking, what happens if your income drops 20%, if an unexpected $1,000 expense arises, if interest rates rise, or if your business revenue is slower to materialize than expected? If the system doesn't hold up, strengthen it before adding debt. Jeremy has a budget, but it's unrealistic, based on what he wishes he spent rather than what he actually spends. His system isn't a system, it's a fantasy. A true system must reflect reality, accounting for actual spending and actual behavior, not idealized versions of it. Principle 6. Never add complexity to a system that isn't already stable. Before adding any new debt, ask, is my system stable, do I have breathing room, separation, and discipline? Will my system hold with additional debt? What's the weakest part of my system, where would it break first if something went wrong? And does my system survive best case, expected case, and worst case scenarios? Elena is considering a $15,000 business loan and runs a system check across her emergency fund, monthly surplus, debt-to-income ratio, and credit utilization. She finds her system will hold with the new debt, though it will be tighter, and proceeds with a clear understanding of the impact. Ask yourself honestly, if you added a new financial obligation today, would your system hold, stretch, or break? Hold means the obligation fits comfortably. Stretch means you need to cut other expenses or rely on credit. Break means the obligation exceeds your ability to pay. Be brutally honest. Your system should hold, not stretch or break. Chapter summary: build the system before you borrow. Stability, separation, and discipline must exist before debt is added. Stability means an emergency fund, income surplus, expense buffer, and credit buffer. Separation means clear lines between essential, optional, investment, and risk spending. Discipline of tracking means knowing your numbers. What you don't track, you don't control. Real systems hold under pressure, not just when things are easy. And remember Principle 6, never add complexity to a system that isn't already stable. Ask yourself, how stable is my financial system? Do I have breathing room? Do I have separation between spending categories? Do I track my spending consistently and honestly? Would my system hold if I added a new financial obligation today? Chapter 7, Self-Trust, the Missing Foundation. Core idea, the foundation of all financial success. Jessica has made and broken financial promises to herself repeatedly, promising to save, to stop using credit cards, to track her spending, and never following through. Each broken promise erodes her self-trust. She no longer believes she'll follow through on financial commitments, which creates a cycle. She doesn't trust herself, so she doesn't make solid commitments, and without commitments, she doesn't act. Even with the best strategy, lack of self-trust creates hesitation. And hesitation is expensive because opportunities don't wait. Self-trust is the foundation on which all financial success is built. How self-trust erodes. James has a pattern of starting projects and abandoning them, side businesses, investing, exercise and diet goals, none lasting more than a few weeks or months. His repeated failures have convinced him that he can't follow through, so when he considers financial commitments, he doesn't trust himself to keep them, leading to hesitation and missed opportunities. The erosion happens step by step. You make a promise, you don't keep it, you feel disappointed, you believe less in your ability to follow through, and you make smaller promises or avoid committing at all, continuing the cycle. Watch for the warning signs: avoiding specific financial commitments, forgetting about goals you've set, making excuses, feeling shame about your situation, and avoiding your financial statements. How self-trust is built. When Maria started her financial transformation, she didn't try to change everything at once. She made one small commitment, to track her spending for 30 days, and she did it. Then she created a budget, and she did it. Then she reduced her dining out budget, and she did it. Each small victory built her self-trust. She began to believe she could follow through, and gradually she took on bigger commitments, reducing debt, building savings, making strategic investments. The formula is simple: start small with a commitment you're confident you can keep the promise even when it's hard, acknowledge the success, build on it with a slightly bigger commitment, and repeat. Self-trust grows through repeated success, not through big leaps. The reframe question. Marcus is considering starting a side business, but his internal dialogue is full of fear. What if this goes wrong? What if I fail? What if I lose money? This fear isn't really about the business, it's about his self-trust. He's afraid because he doesn't trust himself to handle failure. The reframe shifts the question from, what if this goes wrong, to, if this goes wrong, how will I respond? Acknowledge the fear, define the realistic worst case, plan your specific response, and then make the decision. Marcus works through this. If the worst happens, he'll return to his regular job, having kept it during the startup phase and limited his initial investment. He can handle the worst case, so he proceeds. Self-trust isn't built through success alone, it's built through reliability to yourself. Keeping small promises builds the foundation for bigger commitments. Principle 7, never rely on a decision you don't trust yourself to execute. Before making a significant financial decision, ask, do I trust myself to follow through on this plan? If not, what would help me trust myself? What small commitments can I make to build that trust first? Carla wants to take on a business loan but doesn't yet trust herself to follow through on the plan. Before borrowing, she commits to tracking her business activities daily, working on the business for 2 hours daily, completing a detailed business plan, and saving toward the business, keeping each promise along the way. By the time she takes the loan, she trusts herself to execute, and that self-trust makes the difference between success and failure. Chapter Summary: Self-trust is the foundation of all financial success. Without it, even the best strategy fails. Self-trust erodes through broken promises to yourself, avoided responsibility, and endless self-doubt. It's built through consistency and small kept promises, not through success, but through reliability to yourself. Reframe fear by asking, if this goes wrong, how will I respond, which shifts focus to control and preparedness. And remember Principle 7, never rely on a decision you don't trust yourself to execute. Ask yourself, do I trust myself to follow through on financial commitments? What small commitments can I make to build self-trust? How have my past failures affected my self-trust? What's one promise I can make to myself today and keep? Chapter 8, Thinking in Scale, Expanding Without Losing Control. Core idea, scale versus stagnation. Tomas has run a successful small business for 5 years, comfortable, but stagnant. Revenue hasn't grown in 3 years, and he's working as hard as ever. He's trapped by his own success, thinking too small for too long, staying in a stable, comfortable mode when he could be scaling. Scale means increasing output without increasing effort at the same rate, using systems, leverage, and strategy to multiply results. Tomas could hire employees to handle operations, implement systems to reduce his direct involvement, invest in marketing, or develop new revenue streams. But scale amplifies existing strengths and weaknesses. If your foundation is strong, scaling can multiply your success. If your foundation is weak, scaling can multiply your problems. Maria's side business has been stuck at $500 a month for 2 years because she's doing everything herself, with no time to grow. Once she hires a virtual assistant, develops a product that sells without her direct time, and implements a system for client intake, her revenue grows 5-fold without increasing her time commitment. The risk of scaling chaos. Roberto scaled his online business too quickly, growing from 1 employee to 8 in 6 months, expanding locations, and tripling marketing spend. Revenue increased, but costs increased more. Within 18 months, he was losing money, had laid off everyone, and was back where he started. His foundation was weak, his systems were flawed, and his strategy was rushed. Scaling chaos multiplies the mess, scaling clarity multiplies results. Before you scale, make sure your systems work consistently, your processes are repeatable, your foundation is stable, and your team is aligned. 3 stages of financial thinking. The first stage is survival, focused on basic needs, driven by scarcity and fear, working just to pay the bills. The second stage is stability, focused on building a foundation, an emergency fund, savings, managing debt, driven by security and control. The third stage is scale, focused on growth and acceleration, investing, leveraging, and strategic borrowing, driven by opportunity and abundance. Most people never move from stability to scale because they fear losing what they've built. They've worked hard to achieve stability and don't want to jeopardize it. But scale doesn't mean abandoning stability, it means leveraging stability to create growth. You're not risking your foundation, you're building on it. Principle 8, never scale chaos, only scale clarity. Before scaling, ask, are my systems working consistently? Is my process repeatable and documented? Is my foundation stable? And am I scaling from strength or from desperation? Julian is considering expanding his consulting business. He checks his client satisfaction and revenue consistency, his repeatable process, his 6 months of savings, and confirms he's scaling from strength. his business is growing and he's turning away clients, not scaling out of desperation. He proceeds, hiring an associate and expanding his services, growing revenue significantly within a year. Had he been scaling from desperation, simply needing more money, he would have been scaling chaos instead. Chapter summary: most failure comes from thinking too small for too long, staying in survival or defensive mode, rather than thinking too big. Scale means increasing output without increasing effort at the same rate, and it amplifies existing strengths and weaknesses rather than fixing bad foundations. The 3 stages of financial thinking are survival, stability, and scale. And remember Principle 8, never scale chaos, only scale clarity. Ask yourself, which stage of financial thinking am I in, survival, stability, or scale? Are my systems consistent and repeatable before scaling? Am I thinking too small? What would change if I thought bigger? Chapter 9, Identity, who you become when you use debt wisely. Core idea: identity drives financial behavior. Jennifer knows how to manage money. She's read the books, attended the courses, understands the principles. Yet she repeatedly overspends, makes impulse purchases, and borrows emotionally. Her knowledge doesn't align with her identity. She sees herself as someone who deserves nice things and can afford it, even when she can't. Her identity overrides her knowledge. People fall back to the version of themselves they believe they are, regardless of what they've learned. The identity of a wise debt user. Marcus wants to be financially free, but his identity is someone who lives in the moment, spending impulsively and prioritizing immediate gratification. Until his identity aligns with his goal, he'll keep making decisions that prevent financial freedom. The identity of someone who uses debt wisely looks like this: not emotional with money, making decisions based on strategy rather than feelings, not reactive, anticipating problems and preparing for opportunities, not chasing validation, never borrowing to impress others, measured, thinking in timelines, outcomes, and responsibility, and calm from clarity, understanding debt rather than fearing or blindly respecting it. Maria has been rebuilding her financial identity, now identifying as someone who makes strategic decisions, builds wealth slowly and steadily, doesn't borrow for appearance, and stays calm about money. Her financial behavior has changed dramatically as a result. Identity versus self-image. David sees himself as a successful person and wants to project that image, which drives him to buy expensive cars, designer clothes, and a large house, all on debt. His self-image conflicts with his financial reality. He can't actually afford the things he buys, but his identity requires them. Success isn't about the things you have, it's about the freedom you've built. David's financial freedom would be a more authentic expression of success than his debt-financed possessions. The identity filter. Elena is considering a $45,000 car. She asks herself, is this consistent with who I am becoming, someone who wants to build wealth, have freedom, and reduce stress? The car would reduce her freedom, increase her stress, and delay her wealth building through monthly payments. The decision is inconsistent with the identity she's building, so she declines. Write down the financial identity you want to build, your current financial behavior, and the gap between them. Then ask, what decisions would the person I want to become make? Are my current decisions aligned with that identity? Principle 9. Never make financial decisions that contradict the identity you are building. Before any significant financial decision, ask, is this consistent with who I am becoming? Would the person I want to be make this decision? Is this moving me toward the identity I'm building? Sarah is considering a $2,500 vacation. She's building an identity of financial discipline and wealth building. The vacation would add to credit card debt and reduce her savings, inconsistent with who she's becoming. She chooses a more affordable option instead and uses the savings to pay down debt. Chapter summary. Identity drives financial behavior more than knowledge. People fall back to who they believe they are, regardless of what they know. The identity of someone who uses debt wisely is not emotional, not reactive, not chasing validation, measured, and calm from clarity. Identity is not what you say, it's what you consistently do. And remember Principle 9, never make financial decisions that contradict the identity you are building. Ask yourself, what is my current financial identity, is it helping or hurting me? What identity do I want to build, what would that person do differently? Are my current financial decisions consistent with the identity I want to build? Chapter 10, The Weight of Responsibility. Core idea, growth brings responsibility. When James started his business, he felt free, his own boss, making his own decisions. But as the business grew, so did the responsibility, employees relying on him, clients depending on him, loans needing repayment. The freedom he sought came with a new kind of weight. Growth brings responsibility. Each stage of financial progress adds new obligations. Stop seeing responsibility as pressure, see it as power. Responsibility means you're in control rather than reacting. It's a sign of growth, not a burden. Responsibility and debt. Robert is considering debt to buy an apartment building, which would make him responsible for mortgage payments, property management, tenant issues, maintenance, and financial reporting. That responsibility also gives him control over a significant asset, income from the property, and the ability to build wealth. Debt doesn't create pressure, it reveals how you handle pressure. Taking on debt shows you whether you're ready for greater responsibility. Principle 10, never take on responsibility you are not prepared to carry consistently. Before taking on debt, ask, am I prepared for the ongoing responsibility of this debt? Do I have the time, energy, and systems to manage it? Is this a responsibility I can maintain consistently, not just occasionally? Elena is considering a $75,000 business loan. She confirms she has systems for managing finances, the time to run the business, contingency plans, a business plan with milestones, and a track record of consistent follow-through. She's prepared for the responsibility, so she proceeds with confidence. Chapter summary, growth brings a quieter, heavier phase, the pressure of knowing what needs to be done and being responsible for consequences. Stop seeing responsibility as pressure, see it as power, being in control rather than reacting. Debt doesn't create pressure, it reveals how you handle pressure. And remember Principle 10, never take on responsibility you are not prepared to carry consistently. Ask yourself, what financial responsibilities am I currently carrying, am I prepared for them? What new responsibilities would I take on with the debt I'm considering? Do I see responsibility as a burden or as power? Chapter 11, From Reaction to Design. Core idea, intentional financial life. Maria lives reactively. She responds to bills, hesitates on opportunities, adjusts to problems. Her financial decisions are reactions to circumstances rather than intentional choices. A designed financial life is one where you anticipate problems rather than waiting for them, prepare for opportunities before they're obvious, and use money to support a determined direction rather than letting money dictate your decisions. James has a financial plan that includes a monthly budget, savings goals, debt reduction strategies, investment plans, and retirement projections. His plan is designed, not reactive, anticipating future needs and making intentional choices. Anticipate problems rather than waiting for them, prepare for opportunities before they're obvious, use money as a tool to support your direction, and think in timelines, 6 months, 1 year, 3 years. Elena creates a timeline for her financial future, an emergency fund within 6 months, reduced consumer debt within a year, a side business within 3 years, and a home with substantial investments within 5 years. Her timeline gives her direction and clarity. She's no longer reacting to circumstances, she's designing her financial future. Debt's role in design. Roberto is considering a $50,000 business loan. In a reactive context, the debt is just an obligation to worry about. In a designed context, the debt is a tool, a placed lever within a larger strategic plan, part of a 3-year growth plan with a repayment schedule aligned to projected revenue increases. Principle 11. Never make financial decisions without understanding how they fit into your long-term design. Before any financial decision, ask, how does this fit into my overall financial design? Is this an isolated decision or part of a larger plan? Does this move me toward or away from my long-term goals? Emily is considering a $10,000 car purchase. Working toward financial freedom by a certain age, she calculates that the car's monthly payment would significantly reduce her monthly investment, costing her tens of thousands in lost investment growth over a decade. This moves her away from her goal. She decides on a $5,000 car instead, investing the difference, aligning her decision with her long-term design. Chapter summary: most people live reactively rather than designing their financial life intentionally. Designing means anticipating problems, preparing for opportunities, and thinking in timelines. Debt should be a placed tool within a larger strategic plan, not an isolated obligation. And remember Principle 11, never make financial decisions without understanding how they fit into your long-term design. Ask yourself, am I living reactively or designing my financial life? What is my long-term financial design, am I moving toward it? How does my recent debt fit into my larger strategy? Chapter 12, Focus, Protecting Your Financial Mind. Core idea: focus creates clarity. Marcus is constantly bombarded with financial information, market news, social media posts about crypto, ads, and friends talking about investments. He's overwhelmed and unsure what to pay attention to. Clarity comes from focused thinking, not more information. Without focus, even strong strategy falls apart. There are 3 types of distraction. External noise, social media, news, and opinions, creates distraction from clarity. Jessica spends 2 hours daily on social media, constantly tempted to try new things and feeling like she's missing out, which scatters her focus and makes her decisions reactive to noise rather than strategy. Reduce this by limiting your financial content consumption, choosing sources carefully, and creating dedicated focus hours for financial thinking. Internal distraction, overthinking, doubt, and anxiety disguised as productive thinking, is actually delay. James has been considering a side business for 18 months, researching and analyzing endlessly without taking action, stuck in analysis paralysis. The solution is to set a decision deadline, limit information gathering, and act, since analysis without action is just procrastination. Opportunity overload, too many options, leads to no execution. Elena has 15 investment opportunities that all look promising, and she can't decide, so her money sits in a savings account earning almost nothing. The solution is to reduce your options to 3 to 5 you'll seriously consider, evaluate them systematically, and commit. Carlos has 3 financial goals: paying off debt, saving for a house, and starting a business, and he's trying to do all 3 simultaneously, spreading his efforts too thin and making little progress on any of them. The focus framework is simple: choose one primary goal, direct all effort toward it, achieve it, then move to the next. Carlos focuses first on paying off his consumer debt, achieves it faster than he would have with a scattered approach, and then moves to his next goal. Principle 12, protect your focus more than you protect your money. Limit distractions by creating focus hours. Choose your information sources carefully. Set decision deadlines to prevent analysis paralysis. Reduce your options to a manageable few. And focus on one goal at a time. Sarah audits her distractions, social media, financial news, and friends discussing get-rich-quick schemes, and limits her social media time, blocks financial news, and sets boundaries with friends. She becomes more focused, less stressed, and makes better financial decisions. Chapter summary: clarity comes from focused thinking, not more information. The 3 types of distraction are external noise, internal overthinking, and opportunity overload. You don't need more options, you need fewer, better ones, then commit long enough to see results. And remember Principle 12, protect your focus more than you protect your money. Ask yourself, what distractions are affecting my financial focus? Am I overthinking decisions instead of acting? Do I have too many options? How can I reduce them? Chapter 13, Patience, the discipline of letting strategy work. Core idea: the silent killer of progress. James invested $10,000 in a diversified portfolio. After 12 flat months, he sold and chased a hot stock instead, which then crashed 30%. His impatience cost him money and caused him to miss the market's eventual recovery. Impatience feels like urgency, ambition, or drive, but it leads to rushed moves and abandoning systems before they've had time to work. Impatience, not lack of knowledge or opportunity, is the silent force that destroys the most progress. The gap problem. Elena started a side business, worked hard, followed her plan, and executed effectively. But after 6 months the results were modest, and she grew frustrated, considering quitting. There's often a delay between smart action and visible outcome. In that gap, doubt creeps in, and people switch strategies too early, abandoning what works before it has time to work. Digging up a planted seed daily to check if it's growing prevents it from ever growing, and the same applies to financial strategy. Expect the gap, focus on process rather than outcome, trust the strategy, and adjust without abandoning it entirely. The comparison trap reframed. Marcus sees others succeeding faster than he is, a friend profitable in 6 months, a colleague promoted in 18. He's been building his own business for 3 years and is still growing. He's comparing his process to someone else's highlight reel, without seeing their full timeline, preparation, risk, or context. The only comparison that matters is between the person you are today and the person you were yesterday. Roberto invests $500 monthly in a low-cost index fund. The growth is slow in the early years, but compounding creates exponential growth over time, so that decades in, the value can be many times what was invested. The investor who gives up in year 5 misses the exponential growth that comes in the later years. Stop measuring progress against speed, measure against consistency. Are you following your system and making aligned decisions? If yes, you're on the right track. Principle 13, never abandon a sound strategy before it has time to produce results. Before abandoning a strategy, ask, has it had enough time to work? Am I executing it effectively? Is there evidence that it can work? And am I abandoning it due to impatience or a real flaw in the strategy? Maria's business has generated steady monthly income for 2 years. She's tempted to abandon it for a flashier opportunity, but working through these questions, she realizes she's really just comparing herself to others who grew faster. She decides to stick with her strategy and look for ways to accelerate growth rather than abandoning it. Chapter summary: Impatience, not lack of knowledge or opportunity, is the silent force that destroys the most progress. The gap is the delay between smart action and visible outcome, where doubt creeps in and leads to abandonment. Comparison creates impatience. Stop measuring against others, measure against consistency. Time is part of the strategy, not separate from it. And remember Principle 13, never abandon a sound strategy before it has time to produce results. Ask yourself, have I ever abandoned a sound strategy too early? What happened? Am I impatient with my financial progress? How does this affect my decisions? Do I compare my progress to others? How does this affect my patience? Chapter 14, Environment, the invisible force behind every decision. Core idea: the environment shapes the decision. Carlos lives in a neighborhood where everyone drives luxury cars, takes expensive vacations, and has large houses. He feels pressure to keep up, even though he can't afford the lifestyle. His environment is normalizing consumption he can't afford. Environment shapes thinking, thinking shapes action, action shapes financial reality. Trying to change results without changing environment rarely works. There are 3 layers of environment. The physical environment, your space, supports clarity or chaos. Jessica's cluttered workspace creates chaos that affects her financial decisions, leaving her distracted and less productive. Decluttering your workspace, creating a dedicated financial space, and minimizing distractions all support better decisions. The social environment, friends, family, and colleagues, influences your beliefs and behavior. James's friends spend more than they earn on expensive restaurants and trips, and he feels pressure to keep up, considering going into debt to maintain his social lifestyle. Choose friends who support your goals, communicate your boundaries, and have strategies for saying no to social pressure that doesn't fit your budget. The digital environment, your daily inputs, shapes your thinking. Lisa's social media feed is filled with influencers showing off lifestyles she can't afford, making her feel inadequate and driving impulse consumption. Unfollow accounts that promote consumption, follow financial education accounts, and limit your social media time. Principle 14, design an environment that makes disciplined decisions easier, not harder. Organize your physical space and create a dedicated financial area. Choose supportive friends and communicate your boundaries. Filter your digital inputs and reduce exposure to consumption promotion. Sarah realizes her environment is working against her, a cluttered desk with no organization system, friends who spend more than they earn, and a social media feed full of consumption influencers. She creates a financial organization system, talks to her friends about her goals and suggests budget-friendly activities, and unfollows the consumption influencers in favor of financial educators. Her environment now supports disciplined decisions, and her financial behavior improves as a result. Chapter Summary: Environment shapes thinking, thinking shapes action, action shapes financial reality. The three environmental layers are physical, social, and digital. Design your environment to support disciplined decisions. Willpower alone isn't enough. And remember Principle 14, design an environment that makes disciplined decisions easier, not harder. Ask yourself, how does my physical environment support or undermine my financial goals? How do my social relationships affect my financial behavior? How does my digital environment shape my financial thinking? Chapter 15, Complacency, the silent killer of progress. Core idea: the danger of success. James built a successful business over 5 years, achieving stability and moderate wealth. Then he became complacent, stopped tracking finances, stopped seeking growth, stopped innovating, and his business began to decline. His success led to complacency. He stopped doing the things that created his success, and the discipline that built it weakened. When success starts happening, people subtly relax discipline, assuming things will continue automatically. But success requires the same, or more, discipline that created it. Rest versus complacency. Elena, exhausted from working hard, takes an intentional week off to recover and reflect before continuing stronger. That's rest. Complacency is different, it's passive drifting, assuming momentum continues on its own. Rest is intentional and temporary, complacency is passive and enduring. Rest supports growth, complacency undermines it. 3 forms of complacency. Overconfidence assumes future success is guaranteed, reducing careful evaluation of risk. Carlos had a few winning investments, became overconfident, and invested in riskier opportunities without proper research, losing significant money. Maintain humility, evaluate risks carefully, and stay open to feedback. Neglect involves inconsistent tracking and planning, assuming control without verifying it. Maria built a successful business, then stopped tracking finances and seeking growth, and her business slowly declined. Maintain consistent tracking even when everything is going well, stay engaged, and verify your assumptions rather than just hoping they're true. Comfort addiction prioritizes ease over growth, avoiding challenge and causing a plateau. Elena achieved a comfortable lifestyle, stopped pushing for growth, and her business plateaued while she lost motivation. Embrace discomfort, set stretch goals, and stay curious. Principle 15, never let short-term success weaken long-term discipline. Maintain tracking even when things are going well. Stay engaged, keep learning and networking. Review and adjust regularly. And recognize that the discipline that created success is needed to maintain it. Roberto conducts a success review every quarter, checking his finances, business performance, and personal growth, maintaining discipline and preventing complacency, so his business continues to grow and thrive. Chapter Summary: Success requires the same, or more, discipline that created it. Rest is intentional and temporary, complacency is passive and enduring. The three forms of complacency are overconfidence, neglect, and comfort addiction. Leverage amplifies everything, so weakened discipline has a larger negative impact. And remember Principle 15, never let short-term success weaken long-term discipline. Ask yourself, am I becoming complacent in my financial life? Have I stopped doing things that created my success? Am I prioritizing comfort over growth? Chapter 16, Adaptability, Staying Strong While the World Changes. Core idea, the ability to adapt. James built a successful business in the early 2010s, but by 2026 the market had shifted, new technologies had emerged, and his business model was outdated. He struggled to adapt and lost ground to competitors. He was disciplined but rigid, maintaining his principles but failing to adapt his execution. Strong people aren't the ones who never change, they adapt without losing their foundation. They're grounded in principles but flexible in execution. Discipline is a consistent commitment to principles and goals, while rigidity is an inflexible commitment to specific methods and strategies. Discipline is grounded in principles, rigidity is grounded in habits. Stay committed to your principles but flexible in your execution, adjusting your strategies as external conditions change while maintaining your core values. 3 signs you need to adapt. The first sign is that results stop matching effort. Maria's business revenue has been flat for 2 years despite working as hard as ever. When effort no longer produces results, it's a sign that your strategy needs to adapt. Evaluate your environment and strategy honestly. The second sign is external shifts, market changes, new technology, new competitors. James's business has been disrupted by new technology, and his industry is changing rapidly. Understand the external shift and adjust your strategy accordingly. The third sign is internal misalignment, your strategy no longer fits your growth stage or goals. Elena's business has grown from a 1-person operation into a 10-person company, and her old strategies need to adapt to the new size and complexity. Evaluate your situation honestly and adjust what needs to change. Principle 16, stay committed to your principles, but flexible in your execution. Recognize the need for change by monitoring results, environment, and internal alignment. Evaluate options that align with your principles. Choose a new approach with a specific plan. And execute while monitoring the results. Roberto's business faces increased competition. He recognizes his revenue is flat, evaluates new marketing, products, and positioning, chooses a new marketing and product line strategy, and executes while tracking results. He adapts successfully, maintaining his business's growth. Chapter summary: change is constant, especially in 2026, and people fail by confusing discipline with rigidity. Strong people adapt without losing their foundation. The 3 signs you need to adapt are results not matching effort, external shifts, and internal misalignment. Debt without adaptability becomes fixed and disconnected from reality. Debt with adaptability becomes flexible and actively managed. And remember Principle 16, stay committed to your principles, but flexible in your execution. Ask yourself, am I disciplined or rigid? How can I tell the difference? When was the last time I adapted a financial strategy? What external shifts require adaptation in my financial life? Chapter 17, Vision, the direction that makes every decision clear. Core idea, the importance of vision. James has financial goals but no clear vision. He knows he wants financial freedom, but doesn't know what that means in practice, and his decisions feel random and disconnected. Without a clear long-term vision, even good decisions feel uncertain. A clear long-term vision anchors you, making decisions easier because you can ask whether this moves you toward your vision. Without vision, you're directionless. Vision versus goals. Maria has goals: pay off debt, save $50,000, buy a house, but these are specific targets, not a vision. She doesn't know why she wants these things or how they fit together. Goals are specific, short-term, measurable targets, while vision is broad, long-term, and directional. Vision is the why, goals are the how. Vision gives direction, goals provide stepping stones. Elena writes her own vision statement, describing a life of freedom, purpose, and financial security, where she wakes up excited to work on projects she cares about, with the resources to pursue her passions without stress. Now she has a clear direction, and when opportunities arise, she asks whether they move her toward that vision. Debt's role in vision. Carlos used credit cards to fund a lifestyle of consumption, random debt disconnected from any larger purpose, accumulating without direction. Without a vision, debt becomes random, driven by convenience or impulse. When Elena borrows, it's to fund a specific element of her vision, starting a business, acquiring property, investing in education. The debt has purpose and direction. Principle 17, never take on debt that does not move you toward your long-term vision. Before taking on debt, ask, does this debt move me toward my long-term vision? Is it aligned with my financial purpose? If I had no debt, would I take on this debt for this purpose? Sarah is considering a $30,000 car purchase. Her vision involves financial freedom, debt reduction, and building wealth. The car purchase would add monthly payments, delay debt reduction, and move her away from financial freedom. She buys a $10,000 used car instead, staying aligned with her long-term goals. Chapter summary: without a clear long-term vision, even good decisions feel uncertain. Vision is broader than goals, vision gives direction, goals provide stepping stones. Debt without vision is random, debt with vision is strategic. And remember Principle 17, never take on debt that does not move you toward your long-term vision. Ask yourself, what is my long-term financial vision? Are my current debts moving me toward or away from that vision? How can I make my vision clearer and more actionable? Chapter 18, Execution, where everything becomes real. Core idea: action creates results. James knows everything about financial planning. He's read dozens of books, attended seminars, listened to countless podcasts. But his financial situation hasn't changed. He knows everything, but he hasn't done anything. Knowledge without execution is useless. Nothing changes until action is taken. Execution is the line between knowing and becoming. Elena has been planning for 18 months, researching, analyzing, creating an elaborate plan, but she hasn't actually started. Her knowledge has become a trap, an excuse to avoid action. Analysis without action is just procrastination. Start, take action, even if it's not perfect. 3 requirements for execution. The first requirement is clarity, knowing specifically what to do, not vaguely. Marcus's plan to save more, spend less, and invest wisely is too vague to act on. He needs specific actions, clear timelines, and measurable outcomes, like transferring a set amount monthly by a specific date and tracking progress. The second requirement is consistency, repeating actions long enough to see results. Carlos starts a side business, works intensely for a month, then stops when results are slow, repeating this pattern with similar results each time. Take small, consistent actions rather than occasional bursts, maintain momentum even when results are slow, and measure your consistency, not just your outcomes. The third requirement is adjustment, evaluating and refining, since no plan is perfect. Maria follows her financial plan rigidly even when it's not working, committed to the plan rather than the outcome. Evaluate regularly, identify what's working and what isn't, adjust your approach, and stay committed to the outcome, not the specific plan. Principle 18, execution turns knowledge into results, without it, nothing changes. Have clarity about specifically what to do. Be consistent, repeating actions long enough to see results. And adjust, evaluating and refining as needed. Elena creates an execution plan with a specific daily schedule, commits to following it for 6 months, and reviews her progress monthly, adjusting as needed. She executes consistently, building her business and achieving results. Chapter summary: nothing changes until action is taken, execution is the line between knowing and becoming. The 3 requirements for execution are clarity, consistency, and adjustment. Without execution, debt becomes pressure without return, with execution, debt becomes leverage that works alongside strategy. And remember Principle 18, execution turns knowledge into results, without it, nothing changes. Ask yourself, am I acting on my knowledge or just accumulating it? What's one area where I need to execute rather than plan? Am I consistent in my actions, or do I start and stop? Chapter 19, Resilience, the ability to continue when it gets hard. Core idea, resilience matters more than knowledge. James invested in a business that failed, losing $30,000 and his confidence, and considered giving up on his goals entirely. The setback felt like proof that he couldn't succeed. Resilience, not knowledge, matters most when things don't go as planned. Growth isn't linear, it moves in waves: progress, pause, adjustment, progress again. When facing setbacks, there are two options. Retreat means panicking, abandoning your strategy, and making reactive, emotional decisions that create bigger problems. Elena faces a 20% revenue drop, panics, cuts expenses to the bone, stops investing in her business, and considers quitting, making the situation worse. Respond means facing the problem calmly, adjusting where needed, reinforcing discipline, and continuing to move forward. Maria faces the same setback, assesses the situation, identifies the cause, adjusts her strategy, and her business recovers. 3 components of resilience. The first is perspective, understanding that setbacks are part of the process, not proof of failure. Carlos's portfolio drops 15%, but he reminds himself that market volatility is normal, stays calm, avoids panic selling, and waits for the recovery. The second is emotional control, pausing and responding with clarity instead of reacting under pressure. Robert's business faces a crisis, and he takes a breath, steps back, and assesses the situation before acting, rather than reacting in a panic. The third is commitment, staying aligned to your vision even when it's slow or uncomfortable. Elena's business is growing slowly after 3 years, still short of the freedom she wants, but she stays committed, continuing to work, adjust, and grow, eventually achieving her vision because she never gave up. Principle 19, resilience is not about avoiding failure, it's about continuing through it. View setbacks as normal, part of the learning process. Pause, assess, and respond calmly rather than reacting emotionally. And stay committed to your vision, even when progress is slow. Sarah faces unexpected medical bills. She reminds herself this is a normal part of life, takes a day to assess before making decisions, and commits to continuing toward her financial goals, adjusting as needed. She handles the setback effectively, without derailing her financial progress. Chapter summary: resilience, not knowledge, matters most when things don't go as planned. Growth isn't linear, it moves in waves of progress, pause, adjustment, and progress again. When facing setbacks you can retreat, panicking and abandoning strategy, or respond, facing the problem calmly and continuing forward. The 3 components of resilience are perspective, emotional control, and commitment. And remember Principle 19, resilience is not about avoiding failure, it's about continuing through it. Ask yourself, how do I handle financial setbacks? Do I retreat or respond? Do I view setbacks as failures or as learning experiences? Am I committed to my vision, even when it's hard? Chapter 20, Integration, when everything connects. Core idea, the unified approach. James has learned many financial principles over the course of this journey: psychology, risk management, systems, self-trust, scale, identity, responsibility, design, focus, patience, environment, adaptability, vision, execution, resilience. But they feel separate, tools he uses in different contexts, not an integrated approach. The final stage is where all these prior lessons stop feeling separate and start operating as one unified approach. Your financial life becomes integrated, connected, and whole. Maria has been learning and applying these principles for years, making progress, but still feeling like she's always moving toward a destination without ever arriving. When she finally integrates all the principles, her financial life transforms. She stops moving toward a destination and starts living from an integrated place. Integration means understanding all the principles deeply, not just intellectually but experientially, applying them consistently until they become habits, connecting them so you see how they work together, and living from that integrated place rather than a fragmented one. Why most people never reach integration. Marcus has made significant financial progress, become comfortable and stable, eliminated most debt, and stopped learning and applying further, believing he's arrived. Many people stop applying too early, enough to feel comfortable, not enough to become consistent. They reach a level of stability but never reach integration. Keep learning and applying. Don't stop when you're comfortable. Continue until your financial life is fully integrated. The final filter question. Every financial decision can be filtered through one question: does this decision move me forward? Replace "is debt good or bad" with "does this decision move me forward?" Sarah is considering a $5,000 vacation, and applying this filter, she recognizes it would move her backward by adding debt and delaying savings, so she decides against it, choosing a more affordable option. Closing call to action. You've now moved through 20 chapters of principles and strategies. What's the one shift you need to make? Track your finances more clearly, starting today. Pause before your next financial decision, giving yourself 24 hours before borrowing. And evaluate one opportunity with precision, applying the 3 conditions of strategic debt. Don't just absorb this material, live it. Apply the principles, integrate them, and transform your financial life. You don't rise by avoiding pressure. You rise by learning how to use it. Core lesson summary. Debt is neutral, outcomes depend on the mindset, discipline, and structure of the user. Emotions drive debt, identity, comparison, urgency, and impatience are bigger risks than the loan mechanics themselves. Strategic debt requires 3 conditions: clarity of return, control over outcome, and time alignment between repayment and return. Structure comes first, stability, separation, and tracking must exist before debt is added. Long-term success requires a whole stack of traits: self-trust, focus, patience, environment design, adaptability, vision, execution, and resilience. Knowledge alone is insufficient. And debt reveals, it doesn't create. Debt reveals underlying financial discipline and pressure handling capacity. Actionable takeaways. Before borrowing, define the return, not hope, but an actual expected outcome. Evaluate every debt against 3 filters: affordability of the downside, ability to influence the outcome, and alignment of the repayment timeline. Build breathing room, create financial separation and tracking systems before taking on new debt. Avoid emotional decisions, never borrow while emotionally charged, create distance and revisit with a clear mind. Audit your environment, design physical, social, and digital environments that support sound decisions. Give strategies time, don't abandon sound strategies during the gap between action and visible results. And filter all decisions by asking, does this decision move me toward my long-term vision? Some memorable ideas to carry with you. The same tool that traps one person can accelerate another into freedom. Debt doesn't decide your future, your decisions decide what debt becomes. A hammer can build a house or destroy a window, the tool doesn't decide, the user does. If the debt doesn't have a clear path to return, it's not leverage, it's liability. Debt doesn't disappear, it transfers from present you to future you. Preparation always comes before leverage, never after. Debt does not create pressure, it reveals how you handle pressure. And you don't rise by avoiding pressure, you rise by learning how to use it. Final thoughts. These 20 chapters have taken you through the complete journey from fear and avoidance of debt to strategic, integrated use of it. The principles are simple but not easy to apply. The real work is in the execution, building the discipline, the systems, the environment, and the resilience to use debt as a tool rather than a trap. You don't rise by avoiding pressure. You rise by learning how to use it. The pressure of debt can be overwhelming, or it can be the force that propels you to greater financial freedom. The choice is yours.